I talk about the body as a tool for consciousness to bypass the fear programming in the mind. And I believe our capacities in the body are going to expand. The way that we get to experience ourselves as God with a personality.
Hello, dear ones. Happy New Year. It's 2020. We started off on such a beautiful foot by seeing Fantastic Fungi, which Hallelujah Amen was playing in Birmingham, Alabama for like 10 days. And at the screening that we were at, it was almost sold out, which gave me so much hope. So, Fantastic Fungi, if you haven't heard of it, please go look it up immediately. It's loosely constructed around Paul Stamets, who's an incredible mycologist and educator on all things mushrooms, but it's so much more than that. It's an amazing film for anyone that already cares about mushrooms and the future of our species, but it's an amazing film to be able to take people to that don't know a whole lot, because it covers so much territory, from how we're the descendants of mushrooms, which always makes me think of Russell Brand's idea that maybe mushrooms invented humans so that we would construct the technology that would launch them into space and get them to future planets that they want to colonize. But this film is actually way more rooted in science than that. And it really talks about how mushrooms can literally save the world. As Kai Wingo says, there's nothing a mushroom can't do. And something that made me so emotional about this film, really the moment that started me crying, was they were talking about how mushrooms really want to collaborate. They've co-evolved with humans, but they've co-evolved with all life on Earth, because mushrooms are the first multi-celled organism that survived meteor impacts that wiped out the rest of complex life. And they are helpers. They want to collaborate on projects that are life-giving and life-sustaining. That's what they do. They decompose the old and they give birth to the new. And I just had this zoom out moment of being like, well, that's what love is. Love is a collaboration that's affirming, that's life-giving. And I mean, that's what humans are. We are God manifest in human bodies. We are the creative project of the universe. And when we remember that and we're working from that place, it's all about how can we be in life-sustaining reciprocal relationships with the earth, with plants, with other animals, with one another. There were so many moments like that in the film. So please go see it if it's coming to a city near you. Tell people that you know that need to be reminded that there's plenty of beauty going on in the world right now, despite some very real challenges. God bless all the people in the world who are working on really exciting projects, like helping figure out how mushrooms can clean up oil spills at scale, etc., etc. Very grateful. So today's conversation very much continues in that vein. Today we get to hang out with Sheri Bagwell, who I've met here in Birmingham. She is a healer, and you'll hear what that means to her, how that's really about holding space for people to access the medicine inside of themselves. I'm really grateful for her transmission about how to bear witness, especially how to bear witness to suffering and chaos. There's more of that in store for us this year, and it's something I'm really thinking about a lot these days, is what it means to be here for this. Like, why did we all take birth to be here at this time in the human experience? And what does it mean to be the best version of me in this time? I think especially waking up to news about the fires in Australia yesterday, I've just been thrown into a lot of grief. I've been feeling pretty discombobulated and just grieving, which is not inherently a bad thing, but there are definitely shifts in my consciousness that I'm working on making that can help me hold this a little bit better with a little more trust and love, which ultimately makes me more available. And my goodness, Sheri has really beautiful perspective on that. It's not about fixing the world, not about controlling anything. And often I can catch myself in wanting to help situations and actually putting out this frequency, this urgency, this need for things to be different, coming from a place of wanting them to be better, of course, but my need becomes this extra layer of external pressure onto the world, or onto people that I love, that I want to help. And I just become another layer of conflict for them to negotiating my needs or desires for them. And it's really humbling always to come back to the realization that it's about loving what is and trusting that the release comes through that love. And I learned that lesson over and over again. I've talked about it before, and I hope that I'm closing the gap on the amount of time I spend forgetting it and more time in remembering. That's a big prayer for me this year. Less forgetting, more remembering. I know that comes through embodiment. It comes through being it and doing it. Goodness, it's not easy, but talking to Sheri gave me a lot of faith that it's really worthwhile. It's the only thing that we can do. And I really do think as things become more challenging for life on Earth, the more we can do to cultivate confidence in the sovereignty of every living being to do their job, to do their work in the matrix, the stronger we'll actually be, and the more agency we'll find in our own world. And I learned a lot from what she shared, particularly about how she honors the sovereignty of her family members and her child. As a non-parent, but as a child of two people, that gave me a tremendous amount of perspective that the parent-child relationship is just a particular set of roles. It's a particular game that we get to play out with particular sets of people in this lifetime. And it doesn't mean that we owe each other anything more or less than we owe anyone else in this world, which is really wild and really liberating. I love you all. Thank you for being here, and thank you to Sheri. Here we go.
Well, I am Sheri Bagwell, and I have called myself an energy healer and meditation coach. But I like to take the stipulation off that I am doing any healing. I am helping you align with your higher self so that you might heal yourself.
And what do you mean when you say higher self?
Well, the parts of you that are connected to source energy, God, creation.
And I guess maybe a good place to start would be, I'm curious what you see. I get the sense that people come to you with a lot of anxiety and stress, and I'm wondering what you see happening and where that's coming from.
I feel like the majority of our anxiety and stress come from the places where we are not being true to ourselves, where we are doing what society, our parents, or the church, or our community have pigeonholed us into. So I see a lot of people, I call my private sessions beyond therapy. And I tend to see people after they've gone through therapy or they've read some self-help books and they're like, okay, this worked. It got me so far, but why am I still stuck? Why am I still not blossoming? So I will then take them to their truth.
This may be something that's difficult to do in words, but could you talk a little bit about some of the tools in the process that helps people do that?
Mostly I work with the energy of all that is. And I have people use their breath to access that. And so I will have people breathe into various parts of their body. And then I will become aware of an emotion or an energy, and I just then start to talk about that. Like, oh, tell me what this word means to you. Tell me what this emotion, tell me what pops up in your mind when you hear this word. And then we just go from there. And I have a ton of tools in my toolbox as far as I took classes from Dr. Bradley Nelson, who created the emotion code and the body code system of healing. And I've healed my body from lots of illnesses. And before I started to do this, I was a hairstylist for 22 years, really? Standing behind the chair, just engaging with my people, being with my people, and learning what things feel like, because they would talk about pretty much everything. So I developed that, I honed that sense of knowing what things feel like.
So people would open up to you in
Right.
wow, interesting. Do you feel like you have a natural capability that's kind of led you into this?
I started to sense energy probably when I was 8 or 9 years old. And I often would have a knowingness about certain things and people that wasn't normal. And then I shut it all down because it was weird and nobody could answer my questions. So yes, I think it was natural born. But I also think most people are born with some sense, and we all shut it down when we have been told by our parents, our teachers, or whatever, that that's not real. Like most of the time, it's like when we know something about our parents and they don't want us to know, and they shut us down. And so we all tend to block it at a certain point.
That's interesting too, because I've noticed myself becoming aware of like when people are open to doing work and when they're not. And I think as I've become more connected to my own intuition, I'm also aware that it's like, that's not just to like put out on other people. Like there's an exchange and like a consent that also needs to happen.
Oh, absolutely. I learned a long time ago, you don't go dabbling in other people's energy fields without their permission. And I've learned how to go into public places and not be aware of everybody's stuff. Like, I don't have to know that. I just told my higher self that that's really great, but if I can't help them, I don't want to know.
That's really helpful to hear. If you have more to say about that, I'd be really curious, because boundaries are something that I'm learning heavy lessons about at this time of my life.
Intention is everything. And the energy is bigger and freer now than we've ever been given credit for. So even in the spiritual community that was not participatory in religion necessarily, they took us outside religion and expanded it, but they still put on lots of rules, and that was appropriate at that time. Now the energy is freer, and so your intention is far more powerful. And if you do believe in something, it's true. And if you don't believe in something, you can nix it right there and then.
What happens when our belief system bumps up against somebody else's that's not aligned necessarily?
We allow them to have their experience while we have our experience. I don't try to change anybody's mind anymore. That is not possible.
Not a good use of time and energy.
Nope.
Could you talk about the mind, spirit, body connection?
They were all intended to work together as one. But when we started to believe that certain emotions were wrong or bad, like anger or sadness, and we judged them, we trapped them in our body, or we trapped them in our mind. And therefore, now we're out of balance. And so energy can't penetrate either in the mind or in the body, wherever we've kind of lodged that judged energy. So living without judgment, be it for yourself or other people, is my number one thing in creating that mind, body, spirit balance, alignment, where you can live from your truth with greater ease. And I know that was a little bit of a simple explanation, but I sometimes think simple is the best.
Yeah. Did I read that was part of your journey, that you were sick? And
Yes, about when I shut down all of my gifts, I created an illness. It was also some other emotional things from being a very young child and being violated. But I do think the majority of it was me shutting the gifts off, choosing to not interact and play with the energy that sped that up. And then when I was about 32, I found an energy healer who would help me save my organs. I was supposed to have a hysterectomy. And I just thought, well, if I could live a life without hormone replacement therapy, wouldn't that be great? So I went to see her, And I walked out of that space completely different. And over the next, I think, course of 3 weeks, I had all the flashes and memories of before I turned my gifts off. And I actually then started to go ahead and use them as I was a hairstylist.
Wow, really?
Yes. Or I started to be able to become aware that I was using them. But people started to come in to say things like, oh my gosh, last month when you did my hair, you said something that shifted my perspective and changed my whole life. And I don't really remember what the question was, so I don't know if that answers it.
About getting sick, physically sick. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that happens when we shut off our gifts. We either become ill or frustrated or anxious or whatever. And so when that opened back up, I had this whole new life. My body healed almost instantaneously.
Really? Wow, so you didn't have surgery?
I did not. My doctor, I was really young, so my doctor said, hey, yes, you are a prime candidate for a hysterectomy, but you're really young, so let's wait 3 months. So it was probably right in the middle of that 3 months when I found the energy healer that I had used. And like I said, it was almost immediate, but it took weeks. I could feel the endometriosis lifting off of my organs, and I could feel like scabs coming off my pelvic floor, if you could imagine that. And then when it was time for me to go back to schedule my hysterectomy, there was still a part of my mind that thought, oh, maybe I'm making this up. So I went to the doctor and I didn't say anything. We went into the exam room and he kept feeling around. And then he was like, okay, what happened? What's going on with you? Because I have never seen this disease as progressed as yours recede, much less disappear, and I can't find any. And I'd had multiple surgeries and lots of medications prior to that. I was in my 20s when they put me into menopause to try to stop the disease. So I had done all the Western medicine things available with zero results.
What do you think, where is the position of Western medicine in your understanding?
You know, I'm not opposed to Western medicine at all. Actually, I'm not a medical intuitive, but I can help people heal their body when I know the specifics of what's wrong. So a lot of times Western medicine's great for diagnosis. And then there are times when, you know, hey, you actually need to remove an organ, or hey, you might actually really need to remove that large cyst or cancer or whatever. And then let's see what we can do naturally to continue the healing process. I'm not anti-medicine at all. I think it has its place for sure.
So when you said at the beginning that you're basically helping people unlock their own medicine in a way, right? I guess. And so when you saw this energy healer, they were basically helping you unlock the places where you were locked.
Absolutely. And of course, we supported with essential oils and organic foods and all that kind of thing as well. But yes, she was amazing and I am grateful, and I do not one bit denounce her gifts.
Sure.
But I take full responsibility for healing my body. And that's just a huge part of what I like to do for other people, is hand them their sovereignty, make them not bound to me. I want to see everyone free. And I love my people, but if I were irrelevant, that would be amazing.
Yeah, I guess if they're dependent on you, they're not actually really healed. They're just kind of replacing one crutch with another, maybe.
Absolutely.
So you said you're not a medical intuitive. Does that mean you feel like you have a specific channel through which it comes?
I can bring in almost any energy. I help people more with their spiritual awakening, with their emotional and mental balance. However, most recently I have been introduced to some energy And a lot of people will contradict me on this, but I like to call it this because I like the idea of this. And if it is this or not, I really don't care, because labels aren't that important to me. But a few weeks ago, as the Earth became a little closer to the galactic center, I found what I'm referring to as dark matter. And I started to be able to pull dark matter in with light energy. And I have found that that is helping me to change the fabric of my physical body. And other people are saying things like, oh my gosh, I feel a little bit like a superhero right now. So I'm not saying that I don't work with bodies, but I cannot diagnose you and I cannot cure you. But if you come to me knowing what's wrong, we can work with that.
Okay, so this is another tricky one for language, but could you help unpack the idea of energy a little bit?
Energy is what is underneath all form. Your energy body exists before the physical, mental, emotional body. And when you shift energy, you can shift matter. That might be all I have in this moment. That might be all I have in this moment.
No, I appreciate you taking a stab at that. When you talk about shifting energy, then, is that something that starts in our conscious mind? Is that a decision that we have to be part of?
Ooh, is that a decision that we have to be part of? There are certain things I believe that are like designed for you. Our reality is a mix between our destiny and our choice. There are some things we can control. There are some things we cannot control. Ask that question again.
About shifting energy, if that starts with intention or...
I do believe that as you shift your energy on purpose, you're going to have greater results. But energy is always shifting around us. And as we walk through it, there again, we can choose to participate in it, and sometimes we can choose not to. But some things that are so want to be part of your soul, if you don't participate in them, they will... it will create problems in your life. A lot of times health problems and job losses are probably the two biggest, maybe even death of loved ones, are probably the three things out of your control that are going to shift you the most. But when we are engaging with energy, we can prevent a lot of those things, or we can move through those things with far more ease and grace than we would if we were not participating. Does that kind of answer the question?
I think so, yeah. That's something that I at times surrender to more gracefully than other times, but the idea that the balance, like you're saying, between free will and destiny, in your understanding of what we're doing here, have we come with a mission, and it's the closer we get to that, the healthier we're going to be?
I think for the most part, yes. There is a part of me that is very serious, but I like the more playful interaction with energy. And so when I use the word mission lately, I kind of ask people to take the heaviness off of that term, because some people can get so focused on the mission that they just stop enjoying life. And I think if you are in alignment with your mission, it becomes something that is a lot more fun and a lot more graceful. It doesn't mean it's going to take away, most people to come to an expansive consciousness are going to go through a dark night of the soul or something like that. So it's not going to take that experience away. Even the dark days of December are probably still going to happen for most people on their path. I've actually just come out of my dark days of December, where I was just kind of didn't want to interact with anyone, just, kind of felt a little low or sad or whatever. But I know what's going on, so I did not judge that. And I'm just okay, I'm just going to roll up on the sofa with my blanket and my book or my whatever and just be with this. And when you're an allowance of that, then you do come out on the other side of that with more lightness. So yeah, I do believe we all have a mission, but as we come into alignment with it and ease with it, and with the understanding that we are going to go through some hard things, we go through those hard things faster, with more ease, with more grace, than we would if we were fighting it every step of the way.
Just like, okay, give me the lesson.
Like, I'm here. I'm open. I'm ready.
Yeah.
Let's do this.
Do you have a sense of contact with non-human forms of energy?
Do you mean like angels and guides and
Could be, yeah.
that kind of thing?
Yeah.
There was a time I really played in that realm. But when I go like straight to my higher self, I like to bypass that. There's that whole fourth dimensional reality where darkness does reside, and you can get, wires crossed, radio signals crossed kind of thing. And I prefer not to play with that. However, over this fall, I did play with a lot of I got super deeply connected with inner earth. And I did play with the elementals and the fairies and, that kind of thing. So yes, and, occasionally I will see, our ancestors come into the room if I'm doing a group meditation. Before I would ever knew who Kuan Yin was, I'm like, okay, I'd heard the name Kuan Yin, and there's definitely the presence of Kuan Yin in the room, she's the mother of self-compassion. And at that time in my life, I actually really needed that. So yes, I do believe that those things are there, and yes, I can access them, but I allow them to show up. I don't call on them. And I always sit with the energy to make sure it's pure before I will interact.
What do you mean by
that? That makes sense. Like that distortion. Make sure there's not distortion in that energy. I don't really play in the darkness, but as a human, we all have light and darkness that exists in us. And in my opinion, the darkness from outside cannot affect you unless you have not addressed the darkness that is inside. And that comes from the DNA specifically, from your ancestors who, either were abused or were the abusers. Both of that is equally feeling separate from source. And there was a time in my evolution that I believed that I had no darkness, and that I was so light that the darkness couldn't affect me. And I laugh at that now because that is part of it. But when you love the dark parts of yourself, when you can say, oh yes, I have a tendency for manipulation, and then you look at manipulation and you love the part of yourself that was manipulative, because that part of you is just in response. You were kind of trained that way on this earth. You go, okay, I can see that, and I can love the part of me that fell into that. Well, then, now, I have no capacity to be manipulative anymore. And so when you look at anything like that, the darkness doesn't come at you from the outside. But I'm not so blind as to think that I have been able to look at every shred of darkness within my DNA. So therefore, if any presence moves into the room, I will sit with it and make sure there's no distortion before I interact with it. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. No, that's really clear. When you're talking about DNA, are you talking about like experiences that have happened to your ancestors that then were perpetuated in behaviors and in our physical bodies as well?
Yes. The science has proven through Holocaust survivors that trauma was passed down to their ancestors. It's also been proven that we can heal that. They've also proven with mice. So the board, the maze, there's certain pathways that the mice would go down, and they would get shocked every time they would go down that pathway. And so they quit going down that pathway, but when they had babies, their babies also did not go down that pathway. They passed that knowledge down in some way. Okay, so we can't tell you exactly how trauma is passed down through the DNA. We can just tell you that it has. And I work with DNA all the time in private sessions and in my group classes. It's essentially how I work with it, is healing all of the places where you have felt separate from source. If you were a perpetrator, you were not connected to your higher self. If you were inflicting violence or abuse or anything like that. And so that is just as bad for the ancestors that came down through that as it is for the victims. And you see that as an example. Sometimes I'm really surprised at the things I talk about. As an example, you see that with white guilt. The people who said, well, I didn't do that, my ancestors did that, and therefore I am not responsible for that. And then those people refuse to look at how they are still privileged and how they are not activating for those that are less privileged still today. Those are people that haven't looked at their DNA at all, haven't looked at their responsibility for what their ancestors did at all.
And then how is that manifested? Somebody that's not willing to look, like what would we be seeing in there?
We would be seeing a person who's unwilling to look at the fact that they're privileged because they are white. Yeah, that's the best example I have. Because there's a lot of us out here who know. Absolutely. There's a lot of things that have granted me privilege in my lifetime. I wasn't raised with a lot of money or anything like that. But because I had enough money to clean up and present myself and, all of that, it gave me certain advantages. I think Shonda Rhimes has said it, as a Black woman, you have to work twice as hard for half as much. So that's just the clearest example I can come up with for that.
Do you have a sense, it seems to me that particularly in this country, but I think just at scale with our species right now, like there's some kind of energetic coming to a head because we've been so unwilling to do that work. Do you have a take on what's going on?
Well, I don't have a sense for how it's going to show up, but I do believe that the course of the next few years are going to show us an awful lot. Astrologically, the word that is coming is chaos, and how that presents itself. Like I said, I'm not 100% certain, but I know that I've been prepared the last full year for grounding in, being sovereign, being able to hand other people their sovereignty so that I can stand firm and hold a certain vibration while lots of people unravel.
Yeah, what is the role of people that are willing to look in times of chaos? Like, how do we navigate chaos with?
It comes down to that word sovereignty. And sovereignty, we've looked at religiously, like God is sovereign, he's like over the whole world. We're not going there. I am sovereign over my body. I am sovereign over my emotional body, over my mental body. I am not even sovereign over my child. I can do a lot of things to keep him safe and take care of him. But I talk often about life experience. So January of last year, my brother was diagnosed with cancer. And it was a very, it's big. And immediately I went to, okay, Brad, let's meditate together. That he doesn't prescribe to my way of being. So he wanted to not. And then my mother is doing the, Sheri, do something. Sheri, do something. Like, what can you do? Well, actually, I can't do anything. All I can do is love him and give him the space to know that whatever happens is appropriate for him and appropriate for his family. And I had to do the energetic work in me to allow that to be truth for me. And this fall, I had this really interesting thing happen with my son. So I'm creating a parenting program, and it's about reparenting yourself and handing your children their sovereignty, knowing that they're intuitive and that we're to work together as a team. It's not for me to control you, okay? So I knew there was one piece left. So my son's 13, and so I'm thinking, oh, drugs or sex or, whatever happens when you're 13, that's what I'm looking for. Well, one of my 19-year-old clients did an abundance of psychedelic drugs and had a psychotic break. And he believed he was God. And he started coming to me for money because I should just pay him to come to class. I should just pay him to exist in the world because he's going to save us all. And I guess he felt rejected because I've been saying, you taking this perspective like you are God, you're acting like I'm not. And I can't participate in this conversation. And he invited me to go somewhere. And I was like, oh no, my son has a soccer game, thanks, but no thanks. And he was like, oh, speaking of your son, he's a teenager and he needs to learn about gratitude and I'm the perfect person to teach him. And I was like, thanks. Actually, my son knows who he is. He knows who I am. We're good. Thank you. And that lent itself to him threatening to abduct my child and make him his beloved. And I was just blindsided by that. I was like, how is this the lesson I'm supposed to learn? So I did this exercise of like, okay, I've got to do all the three-dimensional things to keep my son safe. Make a police report, give the picture of this fellow to my son, tell my son how to react, how to be aware, do not interact, let the school be aware. And we live in a part of town where my son has a lot of freedom, and that's why we live there. And I'm like, okay, your freedom is gone. Like I'm taking you to school, I'm picking you up, we're doing all of these things to keep you safe. And then I'm going, okay, and now I have to do the inner work. What am I missing here? How did I create this? Oh, actually, my son is sovereign. And what does that mean? Does that mean I could shift his reality? I don't think so. So is being abducted in his path? Was that actually something that he created? Well, probably not. But even if it was, is it my fault? Oh, it's not. So it took a little more work than that. It took a couple of weeks, but it was really interesting. The very last day that I was like, okay, I think I got this, he actually came to me and he said, hey, today I'm going to go to the after-school program, and there's a policeman that stands half the way. I'm going to walk with a whole group of kids, and then when I leave that after-school program, I'm going to walk with my other friend who only leaves me at the end of the street. I'll be alone for 5 whole houses, Mom. And I was like, you got it. Like, you got it.
Yeah.
Like, you can do this, and I'm comfortable. And we've lived with just talking about awareness and talking about psychedelic drugs and just, you got it. And so that's how we do it. We go, you know what? Everyone experiences exactly what they need to experience for them to have their awakening. And I can't control any of that.
Wow.
All I can do is stand here in love and peace and be a grounding force for you as you're going through whatever it is you're going through. I'm a safe space, I'm a loving space, and I'm not judgmental. And that's how we hold space for people, not by fixing, not by controlling, but just by being love and space and peace.
Thank you. That is a really powerful example. Yeah. Yeah, that answers something that I think about a lot, which is like, what is my responsibility in a community, you know? As somebody that's trying to be responsible or a source of connection and good things in the world, like what does it mean for me to be in like a social contract with people? And I think family, especially parent-child, is like the most triggering possible relationship and the source of so much trauma for so many people that I know, for
Absolutely.
sure. Has that changed over the course of being a parent?
Oh, heavens, yes.
Uh-huh.
Heavens, yes. I mean, I knew a little bit of who I was when he was born, you know, because I'd had that like mini awakening, which healed my body. Mm-hmm. And then he came into the world probably only a year and a half after that.
Wow.
So, and he was space for me, you know, as I held him as a baby, but I still had a lot of ideas about what my role was as a parent and how I was supposed to guide and direct and all of that. But I never once, I don't believe I ever once wanted to control his existence. I might have really, really wanted him to be a good person, but I never wanted him to like be a doctor or you know, anything like that. Mm-hmm. Like I always wanted him to be what his soul wanted him to be. Mm-hmm. So I came to parenting already with that kind of mindset. But yes, I have shifted tremendously along the way.
Mm-hmm. So what happens when people do violate boundaries? Like, how do we stand in that place of openness and non-judgment, but also like you're saying in the three-dimensional world, like do what needs to be done to be safe? And
okay, well, it depends on the boundary that's been crossed. But communication. Communication is the greatest key. And if you can't respect my boundaries, you can't be in my life. There's still that. And you've got to know what your boundaries are. A lot of people don't know that. I didn't know that for a long time. So that was a huge lesson for me. So yeah, so it really depends on the scale of it, but communication, like this is my boundary, don't cross it.
That's straightforward.
Yeah. And if you have to cross it, then we've got to look at some other things.
Yeah, that's so interesting to me right now, like the idea of transformational justice and like what to do in a world where there's no police and prisons and like how we hold that space.
Now that's really large, but that goes to destiny. Like there are certain people I believe who came to do certain things, like create the program that helps reform the prison system or any of the other big social justice things that we've kind of got going on these days. There are certain people that is their path. So your role is to really be grounded and open, grounded to the earth and open to your higher self and to function from intuition. And so if it were your path to create one of those programs or to be involved in one of those programs, it's your job to follow your intuition. And if you get that light that like flicks on inside you and sparks and you're like, yes, I have to do that and I can't not do that, then that's what you do. Otherwise you hold the space. And I had a really interesting thing a year or so ago when our government decided to bomb the women and children at the Mexican border. Do you remember that? I hardly ever watch TV. But that morning I'm like, oh, well, it's been a couple months since I've watched the news. Maybe I need to know what's going on in the world. And I turn it on and I see that. And I just started to cry. And I'm like, this is why I don't watch the news. And I had to like shut it down and go to, and I cried for a little while or whatever I did. And then I had to go, okay, but what's my role here? Like I don't have a role. But you know what? Glennon Doyle Melton, she has a role with this. Her sister's an attorney and they're collecting money and they got that. They're handling that. There's nothing I can do about that. So me spending my energy there is actually not appropriate. I will spend energy in my community where I can be of service. And that's my role. So it's not that I don't have compassion, but I just don't spend my energy where it doesn't do any good.
Mm-hmm. Man, I'm grateful to hear you say that, because I think especially now when it's like things are on fire anywhere you turn, if you start to look, it's just completely paralyzing.
Oh, it can be incredibly overwhelming. And so that's why we have to look at the global thing. It's a blessing and it's a curse, because we can send this love around the world and then we can just be aware of all this trauma at the same time. Mm-hmm. But that goes back to sovereignty. What am I here for? What are you there for? You know, and one like little caveat, and some people tell me it's cheating, but I don't really think it is. It's a softer way of being, you know, like those children at the border who were gassed. That was their path. They chose it for some reason. And this lifetime for them is a blip in time. Like that time period that you lived between 8 years old and 16, like, you know, of course it affects you, but it's hardly, like, you don't think about that much. So for them, they're going to learn and do and be from that experience. And they're either going to grow up and change from it, or if they were unlucky enough not to make it through that, that's still just a blip in their millennia of history. And who knows why people choose those horrendous and horrific experiences.
Right.
That's that why question I kind of stay away from.
Yeah, I trust that that's happening on a different plane where everything kind of like balances out and makes sense.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think that's a hard one, because I think it's not an excuse or a justification, but it's like I hear a lot of trust in what you're saying.
You have to trust the universe. Otherwise, you are crippled, because there's way too many things that are calling you. What I can do, like what I feel called to do, is gun violence. Like I hate it. I'm going to put my money towards Moms Demand Action, and I'm going to show up. I'm going to sign the papers. I'm going to do whatever I need to do, because that's something that I can do, and that's something I will support.
Mm-hmm. And it's in your community.
And it's in my community.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we need, like, that's something that I can put my focus on, trying to get assault rifles out of like.
It's interesting. While you've been talking, I've been thinking, a couple weeks ago, I spent some time with these guys that I made friends with in rural Georgia, and they're ex-military largely, and they're very into guns. And it was like the first time that I even held a gun just to be around them. I was like, this scares me, and so I'm going to do it so that I can look at it and know what it feels like. And their reality, their belief system is very like bad guy oriented. Like, there are bad guys, therefore I need guns. And it was a teaching for me to be there and spend time with them and realize, like, you know, they were in the military and they killed a lot of people and they used their guns to kill their bad guys. And like, I was able to have that forgiveness that I think I needed for people who are pro-gun, to just realize, like you're saying, like they haven't looked at the place inside themselves where they've ever contemplated, I don't think, the reality that they could have killed people who are just people, you know, like they need to live in bad guy reality in order to make that whole thing work. And it was really, it was the first time I'd had like compassion and clarity, I think, for the whole gun situation at all.
And I can see where you're coming from with that, and I can be with you on that as well. And that there again, that's that sovereignty thing where I gotta hand it to those fellows that believe that serves them in some way. That path serves them, and I can see if you had participated in wars and that kind of thing, why you would need to have that perspective. Because nobody said that the road to consciousness was easy. To unravel that in your mind, that has the potential to be quite discombobulating.
Yeah.
So I'm going to hand that to them.
Yeah.
and say that I honor them. That you know, and that's the thing, you know, these guys, they sign up for tours of duty and they didn't sign up for that. They signed up because they believed it. Mm-hmm. They believed it. And so I honor that.
Mm-hmm. And they're very much in the like American consumer matrix. So I'm not sure they're exposed to very many tools that could help them look, you know, in a safe way.
Right.
So, yeah. Which makes me think about the psychedelic break guy that you were talking mm-hmm. about. I talk to a lot of psychedelic people, so I'd be interested to hear kind of your perspective on that and what you think is going on there. And
well, it's that kind of thing where there's balance. Anytime you're abusing something, there's going to be a repercussion. I'm not going to lie that when I was 17, I met God as energy, and it changed my entire world because I was brought up as, you know, super Christian family. So the concept of God as energy, I couldn't be more grateful to have experienced that, because even though I didn't move to this way of being and living for 10 or 12 or more years after that, there's a piece of me that knows that helped. Mm-hmm. So I knew that this boy, he had shared with me that he was doing some psychedelic drugs. And at first I was like, you're shifting. That's amazing. I like it. And then he kept coming back, and I said to him, hey, I think it's time to ground. I think it's time to lay off and really integrate what you've learned. And he was like, nope, I can't. I prefer that world. And I was like, I think I'd like to see you ground. I really think I'd like to see you ground and deal with some of these emotions that you've got inside before you go continue. Mm-hmm. And so it was something I watched happen. And he just took it too far.
What would grounding look like?
Grounding would be to take that knowledge deeper into your body and to be able to deal with your emotional content so that it doesn't control you. His loneliness and his unbalanced power is what created the tipping point. Because we all have power, we all have creative potential. He accessed that without doing the internal work that would make that stable. To deal with your the feelings of lack, if he had dealt with that, then he wouldn't have been demanding money from people. People would have offered it freely.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. What was that like for you coming out of religion? Was that a long process?
It was. You know, it was one of those things I didn't necessarily buy it as a child. But there were things that were deeply ingrained in me. One of the first things I tackled was God as a feminine force. I struggled with that one. And that surprises me now. But like I remember doing this as a teenager, like going and sitting through a sermon thinking that is the most effed up perspective that you could be standing up there talking about. And going home and looking up the like 2 or 3 verses that he was taking his sermon from, reading what came before it, reading what came after it, taking my Bible out to my mother saying, hey Mom, can you just read this whole thing? Because that dude just stood at the pulpit and lied to us, because that is not what this says.
Wow.
So I never fully bought it, you know, but I did spend some time in my 20s actually looking at the Bible when I was in a really rough spot with my health before I went this route. And it helped me in that, you know, there's a lot of good stuff in there if you read it fully and then go, yeah, I'm not going to buy that story about Ruth. Nope, there's a whole book in the Bible about Ruth. I'm like, I'm not buying it. Nope, not doing it.
What's the gist?
Ruth's husband died, and so then she was pawned off onto like some 70-year-old dude and had to marry him so that he would take care of her or whatever. I don't really remember the whole story, but I just remember reading that going, that's messed up, man. Not doing that. So I was never all the way in. Mm-hmm. But the Bible's awesome. Jesus is awesome. Mm-hmm. It's just also not the only thing in the world.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, that's such a trap. That's like the trap with the guy that you were just talking about too. It's like the idea that I have the only answer or I am the only God. It's like, yes, you are God, and so is everything, you know? Like, yeah, yes, Jesus is awesome, and so are all these teachers, you know? It's like, it's such a funny human instinct to need to like nail down the one thing.
And it is. It's, yes, it's a different truth for everyone.
Yeah. Well, I guess it comes from that insecurity. If you're not sovereign, your own belief system then can be threatened by others around you if you haven't done your own shit. So.
Right. And as you break down the belief systems that we do have going on in the brain and continue opening up to a broader perspective and then opening up to a broader perspective, you know, I can remember on this path thinking, oh, this is the answer. Mm-hmm. Oh, yes, you've got to do it this way. And then, you know, growing out of that. Mm-hmm. So I understand why people do it, because you want to share what helped you. Yes. And that's just it.
Yes.
Everybody just wants to share what helped them. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the people that are, you know, being evangelical about whatever it is that they're being evangelical about, if you just look at them with like, they're only trying to help, you also don't have to be really agitated with them, and then they don't annoy you so much.
That's helpful. Yeah. Yeah. Was your family able to give you the space to be what you are?
My mother is amazing. And when she talks to me, she asks me a lot of questions, and she'll go, oh, well, that's what it means in the Bible, this verse and this, and I'm like, yes, that's what that means. And my father loves me and respects me and honors me. And I have no idea what my siblings think about me, but I venture to guess they think I'm a little insane.
And I can tell you've done a lot of work to be like, comfortable in that place or okay in that place.
Sure. Like what else am I going to do?
Yeah.
I'm not going to fight they love me, and I'm not going to fight for anything else.
Beautiful. What do you feel like is taking your attention these days? Are you focusing on a particular form of healing or project?
You know, I'm really always working with the most current energies out there. And this energy, I can't remember if we were recording or if we were talking before we started recording, but this energy that I'm playing with in the physical body, which is shifting the fabric of my body, it's got a lot of my focus right now. What I believe that 2020 is kind of like the year of the body. The way that I talk about my work, the way that I talk about is embodiment. We're embodying our higher selves. And the way that I've experienced that is that when I first started to notice it, it's kind of like when I teach, I just kind of take my thinking brain and I move it out of the way. And it's almost like I'm channeling, but like I said, I'm only channeling my higher self, or I'm only channeling the energy that's available. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the first time I'd been talking about embodiment for a couple of months when one day I get up, and we had just moved, so I didn't have anything on my calendar. And I got up and I took a shower and got ready immediately. And I don't normally do that if I don't have anything scheduled. And I went and I sat down on the couch, and I'm like, I'm all ready. Okay, ready for what? And so I'm just sitting there doing whatever I'm doing. And all of a sudden I stand up and I start to walk with purpose. And I actually have the thought, I'm walking with purpose. I wonder what I'm doing. And I end up right in front of my computer and I go, oh, today's the first day I'm going to create a video and post it online. I've been talking about doing that for months. And so then I did it. And I'm like, this is embodiment. This is embodiment. Like when your body can take you where you need to go. And so I talk about the body as a tool for consciousness to bypass the fear programming in the mind. Your body is going to tell you everything. And I believe our capacities in the body are going to expand. The way that we get to fully experience ourselves. I know this might sound a little strange to some people, but experience ourselves as God with a personality. Okay. So I just believe that this year we get to experience that in a way that we've yet to experience that.
Man, that is so exciting to me in this time of like technology and all of the excitement about that. I just like that gives me so much hope that we can go deeper into like the gift of this meat suit.
Yes, absolutely. And like God can live in the muscles, in the fascia, in the organs. Absolutely. And, you know, the way that I interact with food is just so different. You know, sometimes I'm eating meat, sometimes I'm absolutely not. And I think that breaking the rules down and letting your body choose for you what it needs to actually create that thing that we're talking about. It's a beautiful thing to just break down the rules and allow the body to be what it wants to be. That's fantastic. But I also, just to give you just another little glimmer of hope, is we really are on track to have like a mass awakening. The people that have been coming to see me over the last, year or so are people you wouldn't even expect to be like thinking this way, like lawyers and accountants, and like they're going, hey, what's going on? Like, what's happening here? Kind of things. And it's just beautiful. And I really feel that deeply in my bones, that more and more people are going to be waking up to the fact that, okay, I know that I said, we're going to experience ourselves as God in the body, but we're not this body. Like there's something so much more. There's just something so much more. And I'm, really excited about that.
Thank you. Yeah. So how are you discerning things like what you're eating? Are you literally being guided by your body, like walking into the kitchen and picking up a tomato kind of thing?
Well, like my body just says no to certain things more, or I would just crave. Like there was a time I was just craving olives like mad. And I was finding myself saying, after meditation class, we really need salts and fats to support these energetic shifts in our physical body. Salts and fats, they balance the brain, they balance the energy body. So I was just eating a ton of olives. And one day a year ago, like I was taking like a bite of meat like up to my lips and my stomach just went, ugh. And I didn't touch it for 7 months. And then I spent like about 2 months having meat once or twice a week, 3 times a week maybe. And then, I don't know, 2 weeks ago, I'm like, nope, not doing meat anymore. I'm not going to say it's forever. I'm not going to call myself a vegetarian or a vegan. I'm not going to label it. I'm going to eat what my body asks for. And there was a while that I wasn't eating any sugar like at all. I couldn't even tolerate fruit. And now I'm like, I got to have oranges and I got to have grapefruits and like I have to have these things. So it's answering that call, whatever that call is, as absurd as that call might be, because so long I was gluten-free and now I eat bread.
That's liberating.
It's amazing. I have to say I really like that.
Yeah. I like that you're kind of over labels in general.
All of them.
I really feel it with like the new generation of kids that are coming in now. I just feel like they're just in this consciousness of like, I do not understand label world. I have no need for it. It's awesome.
Yes. It's happening. It's coming.
Well, I wonder if you'd have some kind of first steps for people that want to learn how to kind of create more space to be able to hear the messages that are coming through.
To sit in silence with your breath. And to talk to the brain like a baby. Like, I used to have to do this a lot. I hardly have to do this at all anymore, but like, you have a repeating thought in your mind that is about, unworthiness or lack of money or whatever. You just go, oh, precious, I love you. I love that you like thought that. And I love the part of you that still thinks that. And, I'm just not gonna, I'm not gonna align with that anymore. Okay. Feel like the calm that just talking to that brain did. It just was like, okay, you loved me. Okay. You love the part of yourself that is in resistance to whatever. Love the part of me that doesn't want to go to work today. I love the part of me that, whatever that is. When you love it, it goes quiet. And then you can hear other things.
Thank you. I needed to hear that. I think try to strong arm myself a lot of the time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a weird thing, this spiritual bypassing, like putting a positive spin on everything. That doesn't really work. We really do have to sit, it all started with Abraham, 20 years ago or however long ago that was, if you even know who Abraham is. But
I don't think so.
Oh, well, that's not important then. Putting a positive spin helps initially, but then you really do have to sit with what's underneath at some point just to really get at what's preventing you from actually living the positive spin. And then when you sit with that and love that, like even if it's sadness or depression, when you just stop judging it and you just love it, it just loses its grip. It just disappears. It takes a little time. It's not necessarily going to happen in the first time you love your sadness. It's not necessarily going to completely disappear, but that's, there again, we didn't say it was easy.
Yeah, I hear that idea a lot, that it's like, your thoughts create your reality, your belief systems are real. So I think that can become conflated with the idea of like, well, then I must always be thinking good thoughts.
Yeah, but when you've got that persistent, ugly thing that keeps coming up, you've got to sit with that persistent, ugly thing so it then doesn't control you. And then you can actually, then you do find yourself in joy far more often. I used to battle depression and it doesn't show up anymore because I quit judging it. And I'm like, oh, all right, well, here it is. I mean, I even remember one of the last times I was like, oh, I'm sad and depressed today. I'm going to go back to bed and sit with my sadness. And then I was like, an hour or two later, I'm like, well, I guess I'm just going to get up now and do some things because that's all done. Like when you do sit there without the judgment, the spaces are just longer and bigger. And then when it shows up again, it's kind of like, oh, well, hello, old friend. How, I haven't seen you in a while. And then it's like, oh, well, all right then.
Yeah, that's where I can be trapped in being like, my life needs to be an upward trajectory. And the fact that I'm touching places that I've touched before means that I'm regressing or I'm stuck,
Well, I'm sure you've heard about the, ascension as a spiral path. So we're always going up and coming back around and looking at things from a higher perspective. And I find that, the more we do it, the less it takes. Like now, for me, it's like, oh, well, let me look at that. Bam. Like, there's not a process that I have to do anymore. I don't have to think about it. All I do is witness it, and it's like, disintegrated.
It's a muscle, almost.
Yeah. So never judge. And, a lot of the teachers have said, oh, we're going to get to the last of this. Oh, we're really going to get to the end of this. Well, I'm sorry. If you're in a human body, you're going to deal with some human things. And as long as we don't judge it, we just move through it. It's my mantra. Don't judge it.
Thank you. Thank you for being so open to sharing.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. It was a delightful conversation.
If people want to find you on the internet, could they connect with you someplace?
SheriBagwell.com, and that is SHERI. You can also follow me on Facebook, just as Sheri Bagwell, or Sheri Bagwell Embody Your Divinity. And on Instagram, I am Sheri_Bagwell.
Awesome.
Yes.
Go find her.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you for being here, good people. You can find me on the internet at maurajames.com and on Instagram at maurajames. I just finished There, a novel by Tommy Orange. I'm definitely behind the curve. It came out a few years ago, and I just finished it yesterday and had that bittersweet feeling of satisfaction and also like losing the companionship of a friend that's been a voice with me for a little while now. But oh my God, it's the most beautiful thing that I've read in quite a long time. It filled me with a lot of perspective that I needed about contemporary Indigenous experience in this country. It's just fucking poetry, and the end of it is like a psychedelic trip into the afterlife. It's really beautiful. I want to share a paragraph that made me think of Sheri, because it's about confronting the parts of ourselves that we don't like and the games that we play in order to not do that work. And then I'm going to play an East Forest track that I listened to last night during a cannabis ceremony that gave me a lot of self-compassion and helped me release what feels like just this fist clenched inside of me and a lot of the shame that I can pile on myself when I'm not feeling well, that then becomes an extra barrier to transitioning through it. Witnessing and loving all parts of ourselves. Such a journey. I love you, and I always look forward to meeting you in this space more next week. We drove for a while in silence, and then Fina looked over at me. Long time ago, they didn't have a name for the sun. She pointed up to the sun, which was in front of us. They couldn't decide if it was a man or a woman or what. All the animals met about it, and a badger came out of the hole in the ground and called out the name, but as soon as he did, he ran. The other animals came after him. That badger went underground and stayed there. He was afraid they would punish him for naming it. Fina flipped on her blinker and switched lanes to pass a slow truck in the right lane. Some of us got this feeling stuck inside all the time, like we've done something wrong, like we ourselves are something wrong, like who we are deep inside, the thing we want to name but can't. It's like we're afraid we'll be punished for it, so we hide. We drink alcohol because it helps us feel like we can be ourselves and not be afraid, but we punish ourselves with it. The thing we most don't want has a way of landing right on top of us. That badger medicine's the only thing that stands a chance of helping. You gotta learn how to stay down there, way deep down inside yourself, unafraid.
When you witness a dark thought that isn't going to get you anywhere, you witness it and love it. You love your dark thoughts. part of the soul, and the soul loves everything. Everything, not every being, but everything. Loves the clouds and the trees